By 1987, nearly 1 out of every 5 mattresses sold in America was a giant vinyl bag of water. Across the Atlantic that same decade, British families were passing dinner plates through a hole cut in the dining room wall. Down in Australia, every suburban backyard had a galvanized steel crucifix that doubled as a jungle gym whenever Mum's back was turned. The 80s had strong opinions about what belonged inside a home, and some of those opinions have not aged well. Here are 30 strange trends and household items that America, Britain, and Australia genuinely loved, and it all starts in the States. America 1. Waterbeds. Charles Pryor Hall was 24 years old and studying industrial design at San Francisco State when he built the first modern waterbed in 1968, originally as a thesis project about human comfort. His first prototype used liquid cornstarch, then blue jello, which decomposed and reeked so badly he switched to plain tap water. Hall debuted the thing at a San Francisco art gallery under the theatrical name The Pleasure Pit, and by 1987, the waterbed accounted for 22% of the entire American mattress market, a $2 billion industry built on vinyl and gravity. A king-sized unit held up to 235 gallons and weighed close to 2,000 pounds once filled, which meant you filled it once, in place, using a garden hose dragged through the house. Every 6 months, owners poured in a capful of conditioner to stop algae growing inside the mattress, and if the vinyl ever sprang a leak, you did not wake up in a bed, you woke up in a swamp. 2. The clapper. Joseph Pedot of San Francisco put the clapper on American shelves on September 1st of 1985, promising hands-free control of any lamp or appliance through nothing more than a pair of applauding hands. 2 claps activated the first device, 3 claps the second, and the little beige box listened for sound in a frequency range around 2,500 Hz. The jingle embedded itself in the national consciousness within months. Clap on, clap off, clap on, clap off, the clapper. What the commercials never showed was a dog barking, a door slamming, or a particularly loud argument on television, any of which would plunge the living room into darkness or spin the ceiling fan at random. By 2018, Joseph Enterprises had shifted over 7 million units, and Pedot's original clapper papers now sit permanently archived at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. 3. Chia Pet. The Chia Ram, which is where the craze really took off, landed in stores in 1982, with the legendary Chia jingle following close behind. You took a hollow terracotta figurine shaped like a ram or a puppy, smeared it with a paste of soaked salvia seeds, and set it on a sunny windowsill to wait. Over the next fortnight, pale green sprouts would push through the seed paste, and the result was supposed to look like a lush green coat of hair. What actually happened was rarely that lush. One side of the ram flourished, while the other side stayed bald. Overwatered figurines grew white mold, and the whole thing started to smell faintly sour within a month. None of that stopped the sales. By 2018, over 25 million Chia Pets had been sold across America, and a Chia Pet was sealed inside a New York Times time capsule in the year 2000 to be opened in the year 3000. 4. Teddy Ruxpin. Ken Forsey had spent years working on Disney animatronics before he designed the talking bear that Worlds of Wonder released in September 1985 for $69.99, which is close to $200 in today's money. The mechanism used a standard audio cassette.
My name is Teddy Ruxpin. Can you and I be friends? Yeah. I really enjoy talking to people.
Where the left track carried the bear's voice, and the right track carried a data stream controlling 3 tiny servo motors inside his head. Kids slid a cassette into his back, pressed play, and watched his mouth flap roughly in time with the narration, while his eyes blinked on their own schedule. First-year sales hit $93 million, and Teddy was the top-selling toy in America 2 Christmases in a row, moving roughly 5 million units in 2 years. What nobody warned parents about was what happened when the batteries started to die. The voice slowed into a deep demonic growl, the eyes drooped asymmetrically, and what had been a friendly storyteller at bedtime became the most memorable nightmare of an entire generation. 5. Popcorn ceilings. Builders across America sprayed a bumpy textured coating onto bedroom ceilings from the 1950s straight through the mid-80s, and the reason was always the same: cheap, fast, and it hid every imperfection in the drywall underneath. Acoustic ceilings, the builders called them. Most people just said popcorn. Some pre-1977 formulations contained up to 10% chrysotile asbestos, and although the Environmental Protection Agency banned spray-applied asbestos for that purpose in 1977, existing inventories were exempt, which meant installations continued into roughly 1986. The texture-trapped cigarette smoke and cooking grease, yellowed over the years, caught cobwebs in its crevices and shed little white crumbs into your dinner every time a door slammed upstairs. Painting over it was nearly impossible without knocking pieces loose, and scraping it off generations later required plastic sheeting, protective masks, and language parents did not want their children overhearing. 6. The Flowbee. Rick Huntz was a San Diego carpenter who spent 6 or 7 years refining his invention on his own family before filing for United States Patent number 4,679,322 on July 14th of 1987. The Flowbee attached to a household vacuum hose, pulled hair through adjustable quarter-inch spacers into a set of rotating blades, and then sucked the clippings directly into the vacuum canister. Conair passed on it, Norelco passed on it, and hair salons refused to touch it. Huntz spent $30,000 producing his own infomercial in 1988, and by the year 2000, he had shipped 2 million units from a factory in Kerrville, Texas. The device earned its lasting fame in 1992's Wayne's World, where Garth called his the suck cut and shrieked into the camera that it was sucking his will to live. Years later, George Clooney admitted on Jimmy Kimmel that he had been cutting his own hair with a Flowbee for over 20 years, and sales during the 2020 lockdowns spiked roughly tenfold. 7. The Bedazzler. Ron Popeil launched the device originally called the Ronco Rhinestone and Stud Setter around 1978, with the promise that his $10 gadget would make an $8 pair of jeans worth $50. When Popeil lost manufacturing control, Herman Brickman rebranded it as the Bedazzler, and for roughly $12, the machine pressed metal-pronged rhinestones through denim without a single stitch required. The tool delivered a satisfying click as it bent the prongs flat, and every teenage girl in America wanted one. In theory, the results looked like professional couture. In practice, they looked like a geometry teacher had attacked your jean jacket with a nail gun. Studs popped off in the wash, the metal prongs rusted and left orange halos, and the infomercial's tidy patterns became lopsided chaos in actual American kitchens. But wait, there's more became a Popeil catchphrase for the ages, and the Bedazzler is still being sold 40 years later. 8. Ginsu knives. Ginsu is a word that means absolutely nothing in Japanese because the knives were never Japanese to begin with. Two Rhode Island ad men named Ed Valenti and Barry Becker rebranded a perfectly ordinary line of knives made in Fremont, Ohio by Douglas Quicott, and in 1978 they launched what is arguably the most influential infomercial in American television history.
In Japan, the hand can be used like a knife.
The script opened with a hand karate chopping a 2x4, and then a voiceover explained that in Japan, the hand can be used like a knife. What followed was 30 seconds of a single blade slicing a tin can, a nail, a shoe, a whole pineapple, and then a paper-thin tomato, while the voiceover piled up the catchphrases that became the DNA of direct response television. It slices, it dices, but wait, there's more. How much would you pay? Don't answer, operators are standing by. Between 1978 and 1984, Dial Media sold between 2 and 3 million Ginsu sets, and in April of 2009, the city of Warwick, Rhode Island, dedicated a stretch of road to it and called it Ginsu Way. 9. Answering machines with elaborate family greetings. By the early 90s, roughly 3 out of every 5 American households owned a standalone answering machine, most of them dual cassette units made by PhoneMate, Panasonic, or Radio Shack. The hardware itself was unremarkable, but what families recorded on the outgoing announcement tape became a decade-long performance art project. Kids crowded around the microphone to sing entire messages to the tune of the Brady Bunch theme. Parents recorded elaborate comedy sketches that were funny exactly once, and then played for every telemarketer for 6 straight months. Grandma's greeting would warble into near-demonic distortion as the cassette heads wore out. Callers sat through 80 seconds of introduction before the beep ever arrived, and burglars essentially received a free announcement that nobody was home. The whole institution died quietly in the early 2000s with the arrival of voicemail and caller ID, but anyone who grew up then still remembers the exact anxiety of hearing their own recorded voice played back over the kitchen speaker. 10. Fuzzy toilet lid covers. Sears, Montgomery Ward, and JCPenney moved mountains of fuzzy nylon toilet lid covers throughout the 70s and into the early 80s, almost always as part of a coordinated set with a tank cover, a U-shaped floor rug, and sometimes a matching tissue box cozy. The colorways stand as a museum of the era: avocado, harvest gold, dusty rose, moss green, sun orange, and a particularly committed 1973 Sears set made from monocrylic black fox fur. Pile heights ran up to 2¼ inches thick, and the fabric wicked every drop of humidity, splash, and overspray a bathroom produced. The result was a soft, warm environment for microbes, and an unmistakable smell of mildew masked by supermarket air freshener. The lid cover was usually so thick the seat refused to stay up on its own, producing midstream slams that echoed through the house. Every grandmother had one, and a surprising number of them still do. 11. Mood rings. Joshua Reynolds and Maris Ambatz started marketing the mood ring in 1975, though jeweler Marvin Wernick had quietly developed the underlying technology a few months earlier, and none of them bothered to patent it. The hollow stone on top was filled with thermochromic liquid crystals that twisted in response to temperature change, shifting the color through a standardized chart. Black meant stressed, amber meant unsettled, green meant average, blue meant calm, and violet meant passionate. Within 3 months of launch, 40 million rings had been sold, and Reynolds had cleared $15 million, with silver-plated versions going for $45 and 14-karat gold versions fetching $250. The Chicago Tribune wrote at the height of the craze that mood rings were to fingers in 1975 what hula hoops had been to hips in the 1950s. What the ring was actually reading was the peripheral temperature of your finger, which meant that in an air-conditioned restaurant, the entire population of New York looked simultaneously depressed. 12. Canfield's Diet Chocolate Fudge Soda. The A.J. Canfield Company of Chicago had been quietly making its diet chocolate fudge soda since 1972, selling roughly 60,000 cases a year across the Midwest without much fanfare. Then, on January 13th of 1985, Chicago Tribune columnist Bob Greene wrote a syndicated piece that appeared in over 200 newspapers describing the 2-calorie soda as something close to divine. To say it tastes like chocolate, Greene wrote, is to insult it. Taking a sip is like biting into a hot fudge sundae. Within weeks, Canfield went from 60,000 cases a year to 20,000 cases a day. Factories ran 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and by the end of 1985, the company had moved over 200 million cans. What the soda actually tasted like was Diet Cola with a faint aftertaste of chocolate syrup, and fudge fever burned out within 18 months as completely as it had arrived. Britain 13. Avocado Bathroom Suites. Armitage Shanks launched the Avocado Bathroom Suite in 1969, and every other British sanitary ware manufacturer piled in immediately, from Ideal Standard to Twyford's to Royal Doulton. A full avocado suite meant a green bath, a green sink, a green toilet, and a matching green bidet if you were fancy, paired almost universally with burnt orange shag carpet wrapped around the pedestal. There was no built-in shower. You got a rubber hose that clipped onto the bath taps, which sprayed either ice cold or boiling without much in between. The toilet seat hinge tended to crack along the plastic within 2 years, the sealant yellowed against the green, and the bath enamel chipped if you looked at it wrong. Ideal Standard discontinued avocado in the late 90s, and when estate agents polled British homebuyers in 2016, the avocado suite was voted the single biggest feature likely to put buyers off. Strangely enough, Ideal Standard relaunched it in 2017 for hipster young professionals, and it sold. 14. Breville Toasty Maker. Breville, the Sydney appliance company founded by Bill O'Brien and Harry Norville back in 1932, released the snack and sandwich toaster in 1974, and within a year it had sold 400,000 units. Britain took a few years to catch up, but by the late 70s, the Breville had become a fixed feature of every student share house and every family kitchen cupboard. The scissor action plates pressed 2 slices of buttered white bread with cheese in the middle, sealed the edges, and cut the sandwich diagonally in one go. What came out was a molten pocket of cheddar, hot enough to remove the entire roof of your mouth, which meant dinner involved 3 minutes of eating and 10 minutes of breathing with your mouth open. A 2005 survey found that roughly 45% of British adults still owned a sandwich toaster but never actually used it, which means half the country has one hibernating in a cupboard right now, caked in fossilized cheese. 15. The Goblin Teasmade. William Brenner Thornton patented the Teasmade in 1933, but the machine reached its cultural peak in British bedrooms during the late 60s and 1970s, and it was still selling strong through most of the 80s. The idea was elegant on paper. An alarm clock connected to a small kettle and a teapot on your bedside table would automatically boil the water and brew your tea moments before the alarm woke you. What actually happened was less elegant. The kettle hissed and gurgled for 90 seconds before triggering a violently loud mechanical alarm. The tea stewed in the pot while you hit snooze, and the whole ritual filled the bedroom with steam that slowly peeled the wallpaper off the wall behind the bed. The production factory in Castlereagh, Northern Ireland, closed in 1981, and the Leatherhead plant closed in 1984. But the Teasmade lived forever through one scene in Queen's 1984 music video for I Want to Break Free, where a Goblin Teasmade wakes and scalds Brian May, and through its permanent residency as a prize on the ITV darts show Bullseye. 16. Twin tub washing machines. Mondays in Britain were wash day right through the late 1970s, and the machine in charge of wash day was almost always a twin tub, usually a Hoovermatic, a Hotpoint Supermatic, or the famously indestructible Service Super Twin. The machine held 2 drums side by side, one for washing, one for spinning, and it was wheeled over to the kitchen sink because it fed itself from a rubber hose clipped onto the hot tap. Mum started with the whites in still boiling soapy water, then moved to the coloreds, then the darks, reusing the same water the whole way down. Transferring wet laundry between the 2 drums meant jabbing at scalding garments with a pair of wooden tongs because plastic ones melted. The spin cycle shook so violently that the entire machine walked itself across the lino floor, which meant Mum spent 20 minutes with her knee pressed against the cabinet to stop it escaping. All of this was marketed as a labor-saving device. 17. Dralon 3-piece suites. Bayer developed the polyacrylic fiber called Dralon in 1954, and by the 1970s it had become the fabric of choice for every 3-piece suite in Britain, sold by DFS through an endless stream of sale must end Sunday commercials. The suite consisted of a large sofa flanked by 2 matching armchairs, almost always in cocoa brown, burnt orange, mustard, or a dusty pink only upholsterers could name. Dralon gathered static with religious devotion. Your hair stood on end when you rose from the sofa, you shocked yourself on the brass door handle, and the family cat's fur became magnetically attached to the armrest. Every suite came with a set of little fabric antimacassars to protect the headrest from hair oil, and those covers slid off the moment anyone sat down, which meant somebody was always bending to retrieve them. The smell was a complex top note of stale cigarette tar, chip pan grease, and dust. 18. Artex ceilings. Artex Limited had been selling its gypsum-based textured coating since the 1930s, but the product reached peak saturation in British homes between 1965 and the mid-80s. The name itself stands for Asbestos Reinforced Textured Coating, which tells you everything you need to know. Builders swirled, stippled, fanned, or combed it across ceilings, hiding cracked plaster under patterns that caught cobwebs in their peaks and yellowed slowly from decades of nicotine. Artex Limited stopped manufacturing the asbestos version in 1984, but because Britain did not fully ban asbestos until 1999, installations continued for another 15 years. Patching it seamlessly is functionally impossible. Sanding or scraping it releases mesothelioma-causing fibers. For anyone who grew up staring at those swirling plaster peaks from a childhood bed, they are permanently imprinted on the memory in the same faint shade of cigarette yellow as everything else from that decade. 19. Woodchip wallpaper. A Wuppertal pharmacist named Hugo Erfurt patented woodchip wallpaper in 1864, and nobody could have predicted that 100 years later it would cover the walls of every British council house, terrace, and rented bedsit from Glasgow to Plymouth. The paper felt like coarse sandpaper pressed with tiny pieces of pine, hung fast, needed no pattern matching, and covered every crack, damp patch, and dubious previous decorating choice in the room. Most of it was then painted magnolia emulsion because it was the 70s and every wall in Britain was magnolia. Getting woodchip off is the real story. Steam strippers, scrapers, chemical solvents, all of it bounces off years of emulsion buildup that has fossilized the whole mess into an armored shell. Ripping it down usually takes half the plaster with it, which means what started as a cheap cosmetic fix often ended in a structural renovation 20 years later. 20. Storage heaters. Dimplex built the first domestic electric storage heater in 1961, and by the end of the 80s, over 1 million of them were being sold in Britain every year, usually bolted to the wall under the Economy 7 cheap electricity scheme. The device worked on a simple principle. During the 7 off-peak hours between midnight and 7:30, the heater drew electricity to warm a stack of dense ceramic bricks called fiolite, which then slowly released that heat through the day. The flaw in the plan was catastrophic. Storage heaters were blazingly hot at 7 in the morning when nobody needed them, and stone cold by 4 in the afternoon when the family finally came home. By evening, you wore a jumper indoors, and the unit gave off a faint smell of hot dust and old metal as a reminder that it had once been useful. Electricity privatization in 1990 quietly halved the market, and by the early 2000s, storage heaters had become synonymous with being perpetually cold in a council flat. 21. The Hostess Trolley. This appliance hit peak middle-class British aspiration somewhere between 1970 and 1985, sold by Philips, Echo, and Creda as a mobile electric hotplate with a heated cupboard underneath, all on little casters designed to roll from kitchen to dining room. The unit sat roughly 80 centimeters tall in mahogany veneer and chrome trim, with a set of Pyrex serving dishes on top, and the thermostat dial claimed to hold food between 60 and 90 degrees. The fantasy was a serene dinner party where the hostess glided food in from the kitchen without breaking a sweat. The reality was lukewarm broccoli gone khaki gray, a thick skin forming on the gravy, and a turkey slowly transforming from moist to shoe leather under a misted Pyrex lid. Mike Lee parked one directly in the middle of Abigail's party in 1977, and Hyacinth Bucket built her entire personality around hers in keeping up appearances. The trolley never rolled silently from kitchen to dining room the way the adverts suggested, because the carpet transitions always jammed one of the casters. 22. SodaStream. SodaStream had actually been around since 1903 when the London gin distillers W. and A. Gilbey patented a machine that forced carbon dioxide into tap water, but the home kitchen unit only truly took off in late 70s and 80s Britain under the slogan that ran on television for 17 straight years. Get busy with the fizzy. The machine sat on your worktop about 40 centimeters tall in beige-gray plastic, and you pressed a button 3 times to inject gas through a proprietary blue cylinder, producing a theatrical psht, psht, psht that sounded exactly as 70s as it looked. You then added a dash of syrup from a range of lurid flavors, including a SodaStream cola that tasted nothing like cola, dandelion and burdock, cream soda, and an ominous red concoction called Cherry Aid. Every household went mad for it during the first month, then discovered the gas cylinders ran out constantly and cost more than a bottle of actual Coca-Cola, and the machine retreated to the back of the cupboard forever. Australia 23. The Hills Hoist. Lance Hill welded the first Hills Hoist together in the spring of 1945 in his backyard on Bevington Road in Glenunga, Adelaide, using scrap pipe from crashed military aircraft and anti-submarine mesh salvaged from Sydney Harbour. His wife Sherry had complained that their lemon tree had overtaken their single-wire prop line and stained the washing, and Hill's homemade solution was a rotary clothesline that could be cranked up and down with a handle. Gilbert Toyne of Geelong had actually patented the design 20 years earlier, but Hill was the one who commercialized it. His first newspaper ad pulled 6 orders at 10 guineas each. By the 1980s, a standard galvanized Hills Hoist stood 2.5 meters tall, spanned 4 meters across, and occupied the geometric center of every suburban backyard in the country. Kids gripped the sun-hot metal arms, pushed off with their bare feet, and spun the whole rig until the crown wheel and pinion groaned, which is why every Australian of a certain age remembers the exact sound of a Hills Hoist wobbling under the weight of 3 children and a wet sheet. 24. The Victa lawn mower. Mervyn Victor Richardson was a former signwriter with no formal engineering training when he bolted a 125 cubic centimeter Villiers motorcycle engine horizontally onto a lightweight steel frame at his home in Concord, Sydney on the 1st of August 1952. The original prototype used a peach-preserving tin as its fuel tank, and that exact machine now lives in the Powerhouse Museum. By 1958, Victa was producing 143,000 mowers a year and exporting them to 28 countries. Saturday morning, Australia ran on the sound of a Victa 2-stroke screaming at 3,000 revs, with the accompanying smoke haze of blue-white exhaust from a 25 to 1 petrol oil mix that the whole street could smell from Friday night. Starting one was a ritual. You primed the carby, gripped the red plastic T-handle, yanked, and if the mower was cold, you yanked again, and if it was fouled, you yanked 20 times while swearing in language your mother pretended not to hear. Half the men in Australia mowed in thongs, which filled casualty wards with severed toes every Sunday afternoon. 25. The Esky. Mallees of Sydney launched the original Esky Autobox in the summer of 1952, and it was marketed from day one with the slogan, "Take the party with you." The original model was a galvanized iron box with cork sheet insulation, finished in lustrous green baked enamel, and built precisely to fit 6 26 fluid-ounce bottles of beer in the boot of a Holden. By 1960, Mallees claimed that 500,000 Australian households owned one, out of a total population of barely 3 million homes. The plastic Esky of the 80s came in cobalt blue, fire engine red, or aqua turquoise with a white lid, a chromed locking clasp, and the iconic smiling cartoon Eskimo mascot saying "Cool, man, cool," which ran on the packaging from 1959 until around 1989. Dad sat on Eskies at the SCG, on the MCG grass, and at every beach in Australia. The trademark lapsed to genericide in 2002 because by then Australians were not using the word to mean an Esky, they were using it to mean any cooler, which is arguably the ultimate compliment to a brand. 26. Laminex. Robert Sykes founded Laminex in 1934 in a tin shed of just 840 square feet in Brighton, Melbourne, and originally the company made industrial laminates for timing gears and circuit boards. 1947 was the turning point when Sykes launched Australia's first decorative plastic laminate with an advert in the Argus that declared it stain-proof, heat-proof, and excitingly new. The color palette of the 1980s Laminex benchtop reads like a fossilized period ID card. Sunshine yellow, harvest gold, avocado green, burnt orange, mission brown. The signature kitchen dinette was a chrome-legged Laminex-topped table edged with an aluminium T-molding surrounded by vinyl chairs in whichever matching shade was on special that week. Americans had Formica, while Australians had Laminex, and although both products were chemically identical, only Laminex developed the specifically Australian boomerang, cracked ice, and starburst patterns that turned a kitchen benchtop into an immediate timestamp. 27. The rumpus room. Australian houses almost never have basements because everything is built on a concrete slab, which meant the rumpus room was a single-story extension tacked onto the back of a cream brick veneer home, usually about 4 meters by 5. The fit-out was standardized across every suburb from Perth to Rockhampton. Knotty pine or dark-stained plywood walls, cork tiles on one feature wall, shag pile carpet in chocolate, burnt orange, or that particularly infamous shade of mission brown, and a wet bar upholstered in red vinyl. Somewhere on the wall, there was a dartboard flanked by a Victoria bitter mirror and a Tooheys mirror. Somewhere else, there was a pool table. A Commodore 64 sat next to the Rank Arena television, a pile of beanbags from Kmart held up the corner, and the whole room smelled of cigarettes, wet swimmers, and twisties. Teenagers taped the top 40 off countdown in here on a Sunday night, and in 1987, an entire generation of them watched Scott and Charlene get married on Neighbours, which remains the highest-rated television moment in Australian history. 28. Mallee root fires. Mallee is a Wemba word describing eucalypt species that grow with multiple stems from a single underground woody swelling called a lignotuber, which is the actual mallee root. These roots are extraordinarily dense hardwood, harder than red gum, and they smolder for hours with almost no visible flame. By the 1980s, Hessian sacks of mallee root were trucked in from Hill, Uyen, Mildura, and Swan Hill to petrol stations across Melbourne and Adelaide, where they sold for roughly $3 to $5 for a 20-kilo bag. Middle-class lounge rooms burned them in open fireplaces or in cast iron, slow combustion, Jetmaster, Kunara, and Kent heaters, and the sensory signature is burned into the nostalgia circuits of anyone raised on it. A blue-green eucalyptus oil flame, a dense bed of glowing orange-red coals, and an exhaust that smelled medicinally like Vicks VapoRub. A single large root placed on the fire at bedtime with the damper half shut would hold the house overnight. Natural gas log fires replaced them through the 1990s, which is a polite way of saying something irreplaceably Australian quietly disappeared. 29. The Good Room. Every triple-fronted cream brick veneer home built by A.V. Jennings or Pettit and Seavitt between the mid-1950s and the late 1980s had a formal lounge at the front, and that room was off-limits to children on penalty of a wooden spoon. The Good Room always contained the best three-piece suite in burnt orange or chocolate velour, a smoked glass display cabinet holding the noritake wedding dinner service the family used once a year, a crystal decanter set nobody drank from, a Capodimonte figurine of a donkey, and a framed wedding photo from 1968. The carpet underneath was deep pile Feltex broadloom in dusty rose or seashell, sometimes with a clear plastic runner protecting the traffic path. The entire room functioned as a mausoleum for hospitality, opened for Christmas lunch, a visiting priest, a wake, or the occasional dropping in of the Rellies from Perth. Kath and Kim made the entire performance immortal with two lines that every Australian still recognizes. Look at Moye Kim, look at Moye. And it's noise, different, unusual. 30. The Sunbeam Mixmaster. The Sunbeam Mixmaster was the wedding present every Australian bride received in the 1970s and 80s, and a typical 1974 deluxe automatic retailed for $69.99, which adjusted for inflation comes out over $600 today. The stand, the handle, and the speed dial came finished in a brown shade sunbeam, officially called wood tone, because the appliance had been designed to match the typical wood tone kitchen cabinetry of the era. The color palette tracked the broader interior design mood of the decade: white, pink, turquoise, and yellow in the late 60s, then avocado and harvest gold, replacing everything by the mid-70s. In 1981, the first Mixmaster actually designed in Australia, the MX001, was built at Sunbeam's new local design studio by Ian Wilson, and that unit now sits in the Powerhouse Museum. A properly cared for Mixmaster regularly lasts 40 to 50 years, which is why they became generational heirlooms, handed down from mother to daughter, alongside the chenille bedspread and the recipe for pavlova. 30 trends, 3 continents, and one surprisingly consistent decade. What ties these items together is not that they were stupid, because most of them made perfect sense at the time, and a few of them were genuinely clever. What ties them together is how confidently each country committed to them. America sold you a gadget, Britain wallpapered over the evidence, and Australia built an entire suburban identity around a galvanized steel clothesline and a screaming 2-stroke engine. Some of these trends quietly disappeared, some are sitting in a grandparent's cupboard right now, and a few of them are slowly coming back. If any of these items took you straight back to a specific moment, drop a comment and tell us which one your family had, which color it came in, and which country you grew up in. If you know somebody who would recognize every single item in this video, do us a favor and share it with them. Subscribing keeps these stories alive, and there are far more than 30 where these came from.